You're listening to All in the Industry, an independent podcast dedicated to behind-the-scenes talent in the hospitality industry, hosted and produced by me, Shari Bayer. Since initially launching in 2014, we have broadcast more than 400 episodes, and now we're excited to be on our new platform. To learn more, visit allintheindustry.com. Support for this episode comes from the Institute of Culinary Education, ICE. To learn more, visit ice.edu today. That's ice.edu. Well, hello. Welcome to All in the Industry. I'm your host and producer, Shari Bayer, and this is our 410th episode of this series, which is dedicated to behind-the-scenes talent in the hospitality industry. Today, my guests are the chairman and CEO of the Institute of Culinary Education, also known as ICE, and the president of their LA campus. And I'll introduce them fully in a moment. But first, as I do in every show, I will start out with my PR tip, and then later we will have my speed round game, industry news discussion, solo dining experience, and the final question. As the founder of Bayer Public Relations, I'm going to tip the show off with my PR tip of the week. So today's tip is to acknowledge achievements. Yes, take time to recognize big and important milestones and anniversaries and celebrate them to their fullest, however you desire. Your tribute can be a one-time party or a series of events, or simply a moment of reflection and toasting what has been accomplished. There isn't one way to commemorate a special occasion, but rather endless possibilities. So let's embrace our success and that of those we admire and respect and say cheers. It's worth the celebration. That's my tip today. Okay, so I'm excited to be joined today by two amazing people. One is on the East Coast and one is on the West Coast. And they are Rick Smilow, the chairman and CEO of the Institute of Culinary Education, and Lachlan Sands, the president of the Institute of Culinary Education's LA campus. And for short, we often refer to the school as ICE. And it is one of the nation's most prestigious culinary schools, currently with locations in New York City and Los Angeles. This year, in 2025, ICE is celebrating its 50th anniversary. Having been founded in 1975 by Peter Kump, who was also the founder of the James Beard Foundation, Rick purchased the school in 1995 from Peter after he passed and began expansion, making this year Rick's 30th anniversary as principal owner. Lachlan has been at the helm of the LA campus since it opened in 2018. And without further ado, Rick and Lachlan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, pleasure to have you both here representing East Coast, West Coast, and the school. And I've been excited to be working with you guys as well, and feel I've had ICE as a part of my culinary career being in New York City for a long time. I have my own memories, relationship with the school, I feel. But I always like to start out and find out about my guests, their backgrounds, and how they got into this culinary industry. So, Rick, do you want to take us back?
Yeah, the education part of it was the last piece. I would say, professionally, I'm a marketing person, a business person, not a chef, but I've always been a foodie from a young age, and everybody has their own stories of what made them a foodie. In my case, it was my grandparents on the Smilow side. My grandpa was a government employee, lived in Washington, D.C., and a lot of people wouldn't know this, but my take on it is that Washington, D.C. had ethnic restaurants in some number way before a lot of other cities or certainly suburbs. So it wasn't my parents that took me to a Thai restaurant when I was 8 or 9. It was my grandparents in Washington, D.C., or Lebanese or things like that. And I associated food with different cultures and foreign travel and being exotic. And so that's how I became a foodie. And then also, as you'll learn about, I'm a marketing person. And it was really only in my 30s that the education piece came along.
And Lachlan, do you want to take us back a little bit to your roots and what led you to education?
Sure. I actually, I'm a career changer, like many of our students are. When I left college, I went into healthcare, and it was not healthcare is a calling, and it's very important, but it wasn't the calling for me. And I spent a few years in healthcare, not not happy. And I have always cooked. I've always loved cooking, like Rick. And like again, most of our students, food is part of family. Food is part of your culture and your heritage. And I've always loved being around food, and it made me happy. It was what I was doing in my spare time. And my wife, this is how long ago it was. My wife cut an ad out of the newspaper, the LA Times, for the Southern California School of Culinary Arts, and she left it on my pillow. And so I went to culinary school. I was one of those miracle enrollments where I went, enrolled the same day, didn't need to talk to anyone. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And that was 25 years ago this year that I went to culinary school and worked in the industry. I came back to teach. Prior to this, I always had education as a second job. I was always teaching somewhere, doing something, teaching. I came back to teach at the same time I was working in the restaurant, and I it was a lot of work. So I chose one, and on the advice of my wife, I crashed my car twice in a week because I was only sleeping like 4 hours a day. And my wife said, "You got to pick one. You can't have both." And I picked the one with 2 weeks of vacation, and it was definitely the right choice. And then I worked my way from there, from being a chef instructor. Ultimately, I became president at a different culinary school. And then when the opportunity with ICE came along in 2017, I was the first employee here on the campus at the end of 2017, and we opened for classes in 2018.
Wow, I haven't been to your LA campus. I need to check it out next time I'm in LA. And as I said, I'm familiar with the New York City campus. I mean, I remember going to a lot of events on 23rd Street, Rick, when you were there. But take us to your decision to purchase the school, which was 30 years ago, which is so many incredible milestones. Lachlan, you just said 25 years. Now we're at 30 years, Rick, with you at the school, and 50 years for the school. I mean, it's 50 years is incredible. It's all very incredible. But Rick, so why purchase Peter Kump's?
Well, I could say it was so long ago that I don't remember, but that's not true.
Okay, we'll move on then.
No. So I had, already done something else entrepreneurial as a business person before this, and I was looking. It was actually a startup in the pet snack field. I was trying to be the Ben and Jerry of dog and cat snacks. That's some other podcast someplace else.
Okay.
But managed to sell that, and I was looking for a way to stay an entrepreneur, either by acquiring a small business or joining a family business where there was no succession plan, or finding some like-minded partners. And one of the businesses I came upon, quite oddly, was the Barbizon Modeling Schools, which at that time had about 16 locations. It was run as a franchise business. It was for sale. And, I spent a few months leaning into that, and decided that, that wasn't for me. But as I was learning about that business and thinking about it, I realized this is, it's not about modeling, it's about education, and it's an education business. And it's sort of that was probably early in 1995. It's the first time I had ever thought about being in education, or in this case, for-profit education. So I went back to a broker I was working with, and they used a Dun and Bradstreet database that was high tech at the time, and made a list of schools within a 30 or 40-mile radius, and below a certain size, and started making cold calls. And I wasn't in the room when this happened, but there must have been some conversation like, "Hi, I'm Rich DeMichael from the Woodbridge Group, and we have a client who might be interested in acquiring your business. Might there be an interest?" And the general manager of Peter Kump's New York Cooking School said yes. It was a cold call that got a positive answer. And Peter was having a relapse of a disease, and there needed to be a transition. And I often think that if the whole course of history, had been fast forward or reversed, to use the cassette player model, 3 or 4 months in either direction, Shari, you'd be there and you'd be doing what you're doing, but Lachlan and I would be doing something different, or at least in a different place. I was again being well. I sort of the thought process was this is a business, and to make it grow will take marketing and product development and commitment and dedication. But the content is all about you could say food, but it's about careers. It's about culinary careers and pastry and baking careers. And I just had a hunch, which was accurate, that I would find it fulfilling and that I could add a lot to it. And boy, if you had met me in, this all happened in the summer of 1995. If you had met me, winter 1995, I would say, no, I don't think that's what I'm going to be doing because it was really out of left field.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, my career has kind of unfolded, I'd say, naturally, just having a desire and interest in restaurants and the culinary arts. But after college, I went to University of Michigan. I moved to Chicago, and I went to the Cooking Academy of Chicago, a small culinary school, in 1996, which I love that I did and had that amazing hands-on experience. But I'm thinking if I moved to New York after college, perhaps I would have been a student at Peter Kump's, right, when you were on board, because it's about the same timing.
You would fit the profile.
Yeah, exactly. So also I should note, Rick, you were a guest on my show back in 2018. It's episode 185. So we can compare notes after this show and see. We can see if your story holds up to what you said on that show. But 30 years, 50 years is a long history to go through, but take us a bit through taking over. You're on 23rd Street and how the school progressed with moving locations and eventually opening a campus in LA. I mean, there's been a lot of great milestones or steps forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was, it's a, we are a great culinary school, but we also fit in the category of trade schools or vocational schools. I sometimes say, oh yes, ICE, it's a very sophisticated vocational school. But our roots are much different than most other trade schools. The school that I acquired was Peter Kump's New York Cooking School, and Peter had started that as a recreational school, as a sophisticated recreational school. He was, I think, the sort of thought at the time, 1975, 1980, was that at a time when other cooking teachers were teaching recipes and dinner party classes, he was teaching cooking techniques. And of course, from a professional cooking perspective, that's you want to learn the foundational techniques before you start learning recipes and being creative. And so in 1995 there was a career program at Peter Kump's, but it was pretty good. But there was no uniform policy, there was no financial aid, there was no placement. I can't remember if they had grades. I think every class ended up, at least for those old enough, with wine. After every class turned out to be a meal, it sort of was a different type of school, and of course it was much, 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 much smaller. And slowly but surely, I'd say over the next 10 or 15 years, we became more like other trade schools, and it became more formalized, which also means more when a school has 40, 50, 80 people, maybe things will be consistent on their own. Once you get to 3, 4, 500 people, and then much larger, you're not going to be consistent, um, uh, without more structure. And then, of course, added things like job placement and financial aid. And of course, as we did that, we entered the sphere, like a lot of schools and a lot of trade schools, where it's pretty well regulated in more ways than the public would think. And trade schools, colleges aren't very well, at Cornell or NYU, there's not that much regulation, but at for trade schools, it's both at the state level, a national accreditor, and then the Department of Education, which may or may not exist by the time people hear this podcast. But that's a different podcast too. And then, it's obviously it's a very, I mean, we do have an online program now, but boy, it's a very place-based business, and to grow, you need more kitchens. So over the 30 years, there's been, multiple periods where we had to build, and we had to finance the building and get that done in New York City, um, and then to a lesser extent in Los Angeles. And it's one thing to take a little more space in where you are, but we've had, as you know, 3 homes in New York City on 92nd Street, 23rd Street, and now Brookfield Place. And as for those moves, that's pretty much everyone's focus for about a year or two. And um, some of it was, well, 92nd Street, which was a walk-up building, was that was easy to figure out. We'd be out of there. 23rd Street, it was our lease was up, and the owner of the building had different plans for the building, so we had to move somewhere, and that led to Brookfield Place. If you drew there's a map on the school wall that shows, 92nd Street to 23rd to Brookfield Place is a straight line, and if you continued that line, you'd end up in Red Bank, New Jersey. So maybe that's where we'll be in 20 or 30 years.
Perhaps. I mean, and you're 10 years at Brookfield Place, moving there in 2015, another milestone. And that campus, I mean, it's amazing what you have there. And even with the view of the Hudson, it's really nice. I remember the first time going and walking around and being like, wow, this is really cool. So, Lachlan, can you tell us a little about the LA campus?
Sure. The LA campus is it's a little smaller than the New York campus. We're at about 40,000 square feet, and it's beautiful here. It's the campus has 7 kitchens. New York has 9, so we're a little bit smaller in kitchens, but our kitchens are of a larger size. Um, the campus itself actually used to belong to a different culinary school, and so we were given the opportunity to step in and pick it up back in 2015, 2016. And I worked with our campus president, or the vice president in New York, Matt Peterson, and Rick, to get that deal put together. So by the time that school closed, it closed on October the 17th, and October the 18th, ICE opened in 2017. And I was the first employee here. So it was me in this big, dark, terrifying building, hiding under my desk every time I'd hear the elevator open, because I didn't know who was getting off of it. And then we spent about a year renovating. We spent a lot of money. We opened all the ceilings up. I'm always very impressed with our first cohort of students, because they were looking through the eyes of what could be, not what was, because we needed to bring this place up to the ICE standard, and it took some real effort to get it there. But as it stands today, we're in a beautiful home. We've got a beautiful place to cook, and a real focus on preparing students for this industry.
Yes. And, when I went to cooking school and I ended up not becoming a chef, but building my career around chefs pretty much. You have amazing alumni list. People have graduated from ICE. And you have people who've done all sorts of things in the industry, not just becoming chefs. I mean, some of the grads I know about, Gail Simmons and Andrew Ridgie of the NYC Hospitality Alliance. And then chefs, you got Mashama Bailey and Aisha Nurjawa. So talk a little about the alum.
Well, yeah, that's uh, you mentioned some of the highlights. It's actually for our 50th anniversary, we've come up with a list of 50, which certainly in capsules those who've gotten the most conventional recognition, like James Beard Awards or Michelin stars or written cookbooks. But it's we're very proud of that, and it really is a diverse group. For some of them, it's restaurants, and for some people, it's an interesting younger alum is a guy named Dr. Nate Woods. He took a break from medical school in Michigan to go to ICE and went back to medical school, and now he's at Yale Medical School as their first director of culinary nutrition. So
Yeah,
you know,
impressive.
and Andrew Riggy is the founder of the New York Hospitality Alliance. But yeah, in New York City, uh, Missy Robbins, she won Best Chef New York State a number of years ago, and Mashama Bailey. Mashama Bailey won the James Beard Award for uh, Outstanding Chef in America, which is functionally the best chef in America, according to them that that year. And for other people, they've pursued the business side of it. There's people who have written multiple cookbooks, and and then there's one thing that's really been interesting to me, is to recognize how people define success in such different ways. For some people, a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs and open their own restaurant. Um, and for other people, it could be, helping their father, expand their pizzeria on Staten Island to a small restaurante, or something like that. And, based on results, we can see that the foundational education you get at ICE is very helpful in those pursuits.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, Missy is also a contributing chef to my book, Chef Wise, and honored to have her a part of it. And someone that I remember when she moved to New York City from Chicago. And yeah, to see her career, how it's, I'd say blossomed isn't even like a strong enough word. You've had so many people with
And I,
success in the school.
there's some men to be mentioned, like Mark Murphy, both restaurants and obviously in food media. There's uh, a New York alum named Guy Vaknin,
Mm-hmm.
who I
Like
forget what but he has like
vegan.
six or
Yeah.
seven different vegan concepts. But if this list of 50 that we've come up with, there are more women than men, and I don't think there's any other culinary school in the world, that could sort of make the claim, or be such a showcase for a success of women in the culinary field.
Yes, it's wonderful. Lachlan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we also pride ourselves on being somewhat an agent of change. We get students as they are building their dreams and their careers, and a big focus of what we do is to talk to them about the way they should view changing the industry. It's their time to take control of what we should be and what we want to be. So we talk to students from a culinary perspective. Obviously, we talk about modern trends in sustainability and ensuring that we're doing the right thing by the environment. But from an employment perspective, we want to create an industry where we want to be. And that involves you being kind and respectful and treat people with dignity, which may not be the long term history of our field. So we talk to students about making this what they want, and making change in the right direction, and leading from in here and not looking to the past to speak to their narrative.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I have two questions from past guests, so I'm going to ask them. I have two questions because I wasn't sure when we were exactly doing our show. I like asking my previous guests for upcoming guests some questions because they're always usually great, and they are. So, okay, so the first question I have is from Michelle Bernstein. She was my guest on episode 407. She's a James Beard Award-winning chef and restaurateur based in Miami. She's got several concepts, including Senora Martinez, Cafe La Trova, Sweet Liberty, and La Canita. So she wants to know, since a lot of culinary students and attitudes have changed over years with social media and learning, making things so much quicker because there's so much information thrown at them, how do you prepare these young adults for what's happening now in the industry? How do you teach them how to try to slow down a little bit and enjoy the learning process and absorb all that they can before they take on a chef position? Because everyone seems to be in such a hurry to become a chef, and there's no going back once you do. Loaded question there. Anyone can take it.
I think one of the things that we've done a really good job of is focused on core proficiencies and core outcomes that we need our students to learn. Right? We pride ourselves. One of the things that makes us unique in this field in preparing students for the industry is that we have a core mission that it differs from other culinary schools. Our core mission is to prepare people for high-end aspirational chef-driven fine dining. Now, again, let me just off topic. We're not snobs. We know not everyone's going to work in Michelin starred restaurants, but we think that if we prepare people for a very challenging sector, they can apply that skill set anywhere. So that's the preparation, but we do it in as short a period of time as we possibly can. And the reason is there's an opportunity cost lost. Every day they're in school, they're not out working. So we try and get that sophisticated contemporary education done as quickly as we can. That means constant review of curriculum, constant interaction with employers to make sure that we're teaching the exact skills that they need that will get students engaged with the industry. And it means ensuring that our school is changing to meet industry needs constantly. So I think that's really how we get them to where they need to go. Unfortunately, that isn't really it's a loaded question because obviously the person asking it feels like people should slow down. That's not our model. We need people to get through school and out into the industry and engaged with this field and working as quickly as we can. So there's actually a little bit of ramping up. And even with that, they're not fast enough when they get out of school. They still need to practice. They still need to develop as the first few years in the industry. It's like going to college and then going to graduate school. You get the foundational skill set here, and then you go work on it and hone that craft in your first few years of work.
Yeah, and what I would add to that, it's a variation on the answers to the question, but is that I would advise a young person out of ICE or any other culinary school to recognize that the environment where you're going to learn the most is the one where you're comfortable and where there's a fit, where you fit or they fit with you, and I mean, and this is probably true for any field. A young cook shouldn't feel bad or should take the opportunity to move to another restaurant if they feel that they're not learning enough or the learning environment isn't good enough. And as we all know, generally speaking, there's a labor shortage in chef-driven restaurants, and a person who is really in fact dedicated and wanting to learn is going to have a pretty easy time making a move, and hopefully you find yourself as part of a team and in a kitchen where they're moving fast, but they don't want you to move fast because they want you to to learn well. So but then the issue is life gets in the way and then and realities get in the way. I mean, Lachlan and I, we're talking about this a day or two ago. um, these days, and whatever that means in recent years, but recent years versus 15 or 20 years ago, sometimes our graduates get promoted too quickly, because they're needed. Someone is, in the old days, you weren't going to be a sous chef, for 7 or 8 years, and then it went to 3 years. Well, if you're getting promoted to sous chef after 6 months, maybe you're not ready. Maybe. So, finding the right environment to learn in is really important.
Yes. Okay, so let me ask you my next question. So in episode 408, I had on Gary He. He is the author of McAtlas, a global guide to the Golden Arches, which came out in November 2024. And he is also a James Beard Award-winning photographer and writer who's based in Brooklyn. So he wants to know, because you have eyeballs on what's happening back of the house and across the entire industry, because you teach the best practices, what is a trend or something common that a lot of cooks do that drives you mad and you'd encourage them not to do? Another loaded question.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, I this is speaking as a diner, not as a culinary school owner. And I don't know that it's necessarily new, but it's just the whole idea of tasting what you've cooked, and an expediter or the executive chef should be doing that. But I mean, I had a, a situation or a meal with a bunch of friends a week or two ago in a well-regarded restaurant in a ski area, but it was expensive, and the protein came out. It was supposed to be medium rare. It was really, really rare and already sliced, and then they take it back to the kitchen and cook it a different way, and it's sort of not the same. And then so many of the dishes, side dishes, were just too salty. I mean, and I is when I say something, because I like salt, if I say something salty, it's
Yeah.
really salty, and that it shouldn't happen. But I don't know. I don't know that there's anything new about society or culture that makes that advice more current. It except it really, I suppose it. I mean, I don't know what was going on in that kitchen that night, but because there's a labor shortage, um, those I guess those things are more likely to happen. But the good part of the labor shortage for a culinary student is, all things being equal, there's less competition for the next job. You're really needed. Pay rates are, have accelerated quite a bit, in sort of pre-pandemic to now, and I guess there's a lot of things that make it frustrating for the customer, for the diners, putting on our diner hat. But if you're, a recent graduate of culinary school, the opportunities are probably coming faster.
Yes. And Lachlan, anything?
I think this is more a frustration I have with restaurant leadership than necessarily at the cook level. I think that moving through your career with a degree of humility is very healthy for good hospitality. I think when chefs make their restaurant all about themselves, they've lost sight of what the purpose is. And I think that as you progress in your career, become better and better known, I think it is part of just the human experience to also think more and more of yourself. But that sometimes involves treating people poorly as you progress through your career. So I think that a loss of the reason why you're doing what you're doing frustrates me. It's when you go into a restaurant and it is no longer about making the people in the dining room feel special and feel like that it's their experience that is important to the kitchen or to the front of the house. When in fact that's why the restaurant exists.
Yes.
I'd
Okay.
add to that is sort of uh, we might call it unnecessary or ill thought out creativity. And I would blame that on on the internet. And I mean, we can think back to Alfred Portali at Gotham Bar and Grill. He's a very talented chef, of a friend of ours. And when he started making taller food and being creative, he was already an extremely talented chef and knew what he was doing. And it's it, there was a period a long time ago where if something looked creative, it probably was very good because it took a talented chef being creative. But for some time now, I think cooks, sous chefs, chef de cuisines, executive chefs in other places, they see pictures of something and they try to emulate that or make their version of what that looks like, without understanding how what they saw in the picture tasted, or using their creativity to be
Yeah.
creative, but not making a well conceived or balanced dish.
Well, it's interesting. That's a great point, Rick. And it's one of the things that we, our tagline at the school is find your culinary voice. And a big part of that is we're teaching people foundational skills so they can be creative and at the same time create delicious and beautiful food. There are some things that shouldn't necessarily be part of your creative toolkit, and that's a big part of what we focus on in the education we offer.
Yes. Okay. One more question before we take a break. And I feel we've probably, through your answers, already answered this, but I'll ask it directly is what advice would you give to someone who wants to become a chef? I mean, go to culinary school at ICE.
Yeah, let's start with that one.
That's mine. I took that one. You?
If it's someone who's already made the decision, I got great advice from Jacques Pepin, and I just like I've stolen it lock, stock, and barrel. He did a demo for us, and he was asked that exact question by one of our students. What advice would you give someone new to this field? And his response was, focus at the front end, focus on learning mechanical skills. Learn the craft first. Once your hands can do what they need to do automatically, then your mind and your cognitive skill set can step in and start true creativity.
That's great advice. And Rick?
Um, well, always, the idea that recognize that success takes time and you can't rush it. Fortunately, the standards of you know, the chef with the tall white hat of 30, 40 years ago, where it was like, well, you can move a station after a year and a half. After 8 years, you've worked in 4 stations. Clearly those days are past, and chefs and owners move people along quicker. But it does take patience. I would think it's also important to recognize that as you advance, one way or the other, you're going to be more involved in business and management. I mean, as a sous chef, you may be involved in purchasing. As a chef de cuisine, you're going to be more involved in hiring and supervision and training and motivating. And it's which sort of leads to the idea that you know. Well, I was about to say for better or worse, but let's just say for better, being in the culinary field, probably will and should include lifelong learning. And some of what you're going to be learning later on is more on the business and management side. And that's, think about it. I mean, 99.9% of the places we all eat are businesses. And if they didn't survive as a business, they wouldn't be there. So at some point there is a business aspect.
Very
Um,
true.
yeah, and then of course listen, the one of the things that hasn't come up yet about ICE that a lot of people wouldn't know is that our core product is a diploma. We do offer degrees in Los Angeles. We offer degrees online, but the diploma, our typical student in New York is there 5 days a week, and count 5 days a week for 7 months, followed by an externship. It's a program you can get through in 8 or 9 months. And most, culinary schools, and the Culinary Institute of America is a great school, in Hyde Park, New York. But their core product is an associate's degree. No matter how you cut it, it's a 2-year experience. And a lot of the culinary schools that used to exist that no longer were also 2 or 2.5 year programs. And I just think there's lots of people in America who assume that going to a really good culinary school is going to take a couple years, and in the case of ICE, that's not the case.
And I should also add that our students, our graduates, are out there getting the same jobs, competing for the same jobs, and getting the same jobs as those other graduates.
Yes, very good points. And on that note, let's take a little break and we will come back. We're going to play my speed round. We have some industry news, my solo dining experience, and the final question. So stay with us. This is all in the industry. For all you aspiring chefs, bakers, and food entrepreneurs out there, have you considered taking your passion to the next level? Maybe you dream of opening your own restaurant, becoming a pastry chef extraordinaire, or even a sommelier. Whatever your culinary aspiration, the Institute of Culinary Education, ICE, can help you turn it into reality. At its campuses in New York City and Los Angeles, ICE offers fast-track programs in a variety of areas, from culinary arts to pastry and baking, to restaurant management, hospitality management, and even sommelier training. And you can graduate in as little as 8 months. Did you know that some of the top name chefs and industry professionals that you've met right here on All in the Industry are ICE graduates? That's right. Stars like Gail Simmons, Andrew Ridgie, and Missy Robbins all hone their craft at ICE. Ready to pursue your dreams and find your culinary voice? Visit ice.edu today. That's ice.edu. Welcome back to All in the Industry. I'm your host and producer, Shari Bayer. My guests today are Rick Smilow, the chairman and CEO of the Institute of Culinary Education, and Lachlan Sands, the president of the LA campus at the Institute of Culinary Education. And it's time for my speed round. So what this is I'm going to name a couple things and you get to pick your preference, such as chocolate or vanilla. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I feel like you guys were both born ready for this.
If it's about food, I'm ready.
It's about food. Of course. Okay, so here we go. Eat in at home or eat out at a restaurant?
Out. Actually, so Lachlan is a talented chef. I am not a talented chef, though I've learned a lot. When I'm cooking at home in Connecticut, I often call Lachlan in Pasadena. So, and if he's busy, I got 40 other people to call.
Okay, that's cool. I was thinking if you guys answer the same way every time, then I don't have to help listeners know who's who. I think people will pick up your voices, but we'll see how this goes. Who wants to go first? But okay, we'll keep going. Indoor dining or al fresco dining?
Lachlan says al fresco. I like eating outside.
Yeah, I would say Rick says it depends on the weather, but outside is great. Certainly, some of the most memorable meals have been outside in a beautiful place.
Great. Wine, beer, cocktail, spiritless drink, or champagne?
Cocktail.
Start with cocktails, then move on to wine. That's the standard.
Fantastic. Tasting menu or a la carte?
A la carte. I like to have a little bit more control. Well, gosh, that's so hard. It depends where you are, I suppose. But for the most part, a la carte.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say a la carte, but interestingly, as Lachlan knows, sometimes if you get enough people, say 6 or 8 people, you can create a tasting menu from the a la carte listings, and it usually involves writing on the menu, making it clear to the waiter or waitress, but it's been known to happen.
Taking control. Well, another way you can sample the whole menu is from my next one. I have small plates or large plates. Get all the small plates. I guess it depends
Small.
how many people you got.
I'm all about small plates. I'm all about trying many, many things and learning from what I eat.
And
Yeah,
Rick?
and it's also the I mean, sometimes large plates, what you're eating, it gets fatiguing. Um,
Yeah.
so I'd say small plates.
Communal table or chef's counter?
Communal table.
Yeah, I would go with that as well. But part of my issue is I spent years in the kitchen, so when I'm there, when I'm at the chef's counter, I'm like fully distracted by the
Yeah.
by what's going on in the kitchen, and it's hard for me to pay attention to my company. And that's why we're there. It's a social event.
I could see that. I love chef's counter, but I could see like, yeah, you're watching everything and you might want to like jump behind the line.
And it depends if the chef or the sous chef really has the time to interact. I mean, are
Mhm.
you watching and talking or just watching? So
Yes, sometimes more of one than the other. Very, very true. Okay, tipping or all-inclusive charge? This is my kind of, my loaded one.
I wish the all-inclusive charge idea worked, uh, but it. I mean, there are places that have that, but to take the sort of philosophy that Danny Meyer tried in New York, 8 or 9 years ago, that
Mhm.
didn't work. So um, the important thing is to tip well if you enjoyed the meal.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and
Lachlan.
originally I'm from Australia where there is no tipping, and so I've seen it work. It does actually work in other places. So I would like it to work here. We've got a long way to go.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I wasn't exactly sure from the accent, but I love Australia. And yeah, we'll have to dive into that at a later time. I want to hear about living in Australia. I've been once.
But
Okay.
Lachlan, he hasn't succeeded in getting Marmite in the curriculum.
He's still
I'm working on it.
working on it. You've been working on it since 2018,
I
17.
continue to fail, but that will never stop.
All right. Well, I'll support that. I mean, yeah, why not? Okay, a few more. Cooking or being cooked for?
Oh, cooked for. I'm the easiest person in the world to cook for. I enjoy food, and years ago, I learned to switch off my grading system. I'm happy to eat out and be cooked for. Happier than cooking for. It's like the busman's holiday, right? You don't want to go driving for your holiday. I would rather have someone cook for me.
Which that's sort of a segue to an interesting anecdote that maybe you both heard before, but your listeners haven't. So, 1995 is when I became involved with Peter Kump's New York Cooking School. The first time I heard about the school was 4 or 5 years earlier on my first date with the woman I ended up marrying, and I'm still married to. Debbie professionally was an orthodontist, but when we get to that part of the date where he's like, "Well, what else do you got going on in life?" And Debbie said, "Well, I'm taking techniques of fine cooking level 1 at Peter Kump's New York Cooking School." And I said, "Oh, what's that? And where's that?" And we talked about that for a while. And the business that I've been involved with now for 30 years, I first heard about 5 years earlier from the woman I've been with all that time. And I don't. It seems like a lot of kismet there. I'm not sure, but I think that's what you call kismet.
100% and giving Debbie credit. I love it. So, who cooks more, Debbie or you?
She's I can hold my own, but she's I have to say she's a better cook. She's also by by being an orthodontist, she's uh, got good technical skills, good with her hands, good at reading directions, um, disciplined. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not.
Well, I'm guessing the answer to that question that one for you then is being cooked for, Rick.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. And that's good to know. Okay. I've got three more. I got Shake Shack or In and Out Burger.
I'm in LA, in and out every day
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
week.
Rick?
Shake Shack.
All right. There we go. East and West
Yeah, East
represented.
versus West, right?
Cheese plate or dessert?
Ooh.
It's easy for me. I go cheese plate. I shockingly don't have a terribly sweet tooth.
What's
Um,
wrong
wh-
with you? No.
I know. When I was in culinary school, we did 12 weeks of baking and pastry, and I lost 50 pounds doing those 12 weeks. 50 because I just didn't eat the
Yeah.
food.
Yeah.
I mean, I love cheese, but I would say dessert, but it has to be, I like desserts that tend to be more brown or have a lot of brown in them, like pecan pie. And, when it comes to chocolate,
Chocolate.
I mean, white chocolate, if I never eat white chocolate the rest of my life, that'd be fine. But, bittersweet chocolate or, uh, you know, bananas that have been sautéed with,
Yeah. Okay.
or peach melba, things like that. So I tend, but although sometimes people would say, well, Rick, what's your favorite dessert? And I'd say tuna tartare.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, could we have some charcuterie with that cheese plate, and then I'm in.
You can have whatever you want. There's no rules to this game. My last one is New York City or Los Angeles.
Well, I have to vote for New York City and Los
Yeah,
Angeles.
Well, having just recently won the World Series, I would say LA.
there you go. I mean, you got to represent your cities for sure. So that's the
That
game.
that being said, we are absolutely blessed to have schools in the two culinary capitals of this
Hmm.
country. Both are such exciting cities to eat in, that it is an absolute joy to travel to New York. The problem is New York has this thing called snow, which to my mind is God's way of saying move south. And so I just can't. But
Yeah,
New York is wonderful.
I hear
Yeah, and
you.
I at this point I go to Los Angeles probably 3 or 4 times a year, and always spend some of that time eating out and trying new things. And um, obviously, they're both great food cities, but I definitely have noticed in Los Angeles it is relatively more likely that a menu would be designed to sharing plates versus getting a entree with a vegetable and a carb on the side of it. Not I mean Obviously in New York it is 2025 and there's all types of menus and menu design, but all things being equal, in Los Angeles you're probably more likely to get something uh,
Hmm.
that was meant to be shared.
Yeah. All right. Well, I love both cities. I mean, I've been in New York for a long time and I love visiting LA. And it's always the best weather. Even though I have to say it's rained now a couple of times when I've been out there and I'm always like I didn't know it rained, but I know you need the rain. So, but yeah, LA weather always gets me. But I do appreciate seasons because I grew up in Miami, and so that's the one thing. It gets super cold here in New York, but then that makes me appreciate the beautiful sunny warm days more. Okay, so that's the game. That was awesome. And now for industry news, I just have one article, speaking of cities, that I picked out, and it was in TimeOut, and it's entitled The World's 20 Best Cities for Food Right Now. It says, we asked thousands of locals all about eating out in their cities to rank the world's culinary capitals in 2025. And this is by Grace Beard, and this came out about a week and a half ago. And it has, 20 awesome cities listed. Some I've been to, some I haven't. The number one spot has New Orleans, which I do feel is an outstanding culinary city. Surprisingly, this list did not have New York City or Los Angeles on it.
Because
And
it's
I think they're
boring
both,
if you add those.
what's that?
It's boring if you add those.
I guess so, but they're both amazing culinary cities. But they have Bangkok as number two, which I've been to is amazing, and I have not been to number three, which is Medellin in Colombia. Am I saying that right?
Medellin, I think is the
Medellin.
Medellin.
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, any take on this list? Did you browse through? Either of you?
How so lists are designed to help people buy magazines. They're not necessarily designed to give accurate. It's hard. These are all wonderful places to go and eat, but if you want to live in a city and eat there every day of the year, you're probably going to end up in cities like LA and New York and Paris and Rome and But if you keep adding the same 8 cities list after list after list, no one's going to buy your magazine.
Yeah, Paris is on the list. They got it as number 9. Paris made it. But yeah, I mean, lists are lists, but yeah, Rick, any take on this?
Yeah, it reminds me, there's this concept of a world gastronomy site, which might have something to do with UNESCO, which is part of the United Nations and all of that. And they they don't have any of the biggest conventional culinary capitals as world gastronomy sites. And I can't. I once I saw what the criteria was, and it sort of made sense. But it's lists are meant to have surprises and be provocative. But it is so the list is not accurate, but a good truth about it for young culinary professionals and young culinary school graduates is that there are now, for a number of years, say the last decade, there's great restaurants everywhere, which means there's great places to learn and there's mentors. And, frankly, what makes it tough for an owner and, owners of a certain age and a lot of men and women we know in LA and New York is that the talent is moving to Nashville and moving to New Orleans and moving to Boise, Idaho, and the quality of the restaurants there and the creativity you can find is just so much more than it used to be. So overall, for America, and for aspiring culinary professionals, that's great. But if you're a established, restaurateur in one of the big cities, maybe it's not the best trend.
Yes. And yeah, I think it's cool to look at these lists, to get inspired. Like, never been to Cape Town. It's a place I've always wanted to go, but it was number 4 in the list. And like, just
Huh.
to get that inspiration, maybe traveling to different destinations and calling out cities that maybe don't get as much attention as well. But I think there's wonderful food choices and restaurants around the world,
Any
destinations.
cities in Japan on there?
Um, Tokyo isn't on the list. I don't think they have Japan, and yeah, Japan's an
Yeah, yeah.
awesome destination. So, well, it's something to talk about, get us talking, and I like that they're highlighting cities too. That, as I said, I haven't been to, some I have, and it inspires travel and supports restaurants. So, okay, so that's that. Now it's time for my solo dining experience. I'm going to run through experience I had. If either of you want to chime in at some point, I don't know if you've been to this restaurant. We will find out. But this week, my solo dining experience is at Joomak. Here's the rundown. The location: 401 West Street in the Maison Hudson in the West Village of New York City. So the concept, it's a new iteration of Michelin-starred Joomak Banjum in New York City, which had opened in 2020. So the chef and owner is Jiho Kim. And why did I go? Well, I had been to his original concept, and his PR reached out to me and told me about this new opening, which was at the end of January, and invited me to go. And I was like, yes, I'd love to go and check it out. So I did go. My experience: it was a cold, rainy night in New York City when I went out there, and this place is located on the West Side Highway in the West Village. So it's a little bit of a walk to get there, but it's in a beautiful property. And I went for the earlier seating, and I entered like a lobby area, and they bring you up in an elevator to the second floor where the dining room is, and it was a very intimate space. It felt like dining in someone's like luxury home. It had like a fireplace. I think it was like a fake fireplace running on one side of the room and the bar on the other side. And the team was very hospitable and warm and welcoming. And I had a really nice time. And chef was there and he presented some of the dishes. So what did I get? They're doing an 8-course tasting menu. And some of the dishes, it started out with a amuse bouche, which had 3 little bites of little sliders, but they were all different. There was a king salmon, everything bagel, a choux a la otoro, and A5 Wagyu and Hokkaido Udi Sando. So very different. Some of the other courses, there was golden etc. caviar. There was a pretzel croissant. There was a scallop, langoustine, Norwegian king crab. And then it ended with this banana bread pudding. And there was also a coconut mango shumai. So my take, it was really delicious. It was very unique. Some tableside presentations. I left full, but not like too full. So it was the right amount of food. Some highlights, some of the bites, like the beginning, the choux a la toro, I thought was amazing. I love the langoustine and the dessert at the end. The chef started as a pastry chef and he has this dessert, a banana bread pudding that's like, I would go to this restaurant if they would just let me like have that dessert. Because if we're going to answer the question of cheese plate or dessert, I'm dessert. And so yeah, it was really wonderful. So that's my take. And the ambiance, as I said, it's like an intimate dining room. It's elegant. I was at a table on the side of the room. It was like a marble table, very plush chairs. I think it's about 25 seats. I'd say this restaurant is perfect for date night. Interesting tidbit. So this property, the Maison Hudson, it's a luxury residential hotel that has a minimum of 30 days to stay there. I was looking through their website. It is not inexpensive, I'll say that. But yeah, it's like a long-term hotel residency. And they also have a private rooftop that I think the restaurant's going to be doing something upstairs when the weather gets warmer, and it has a holistic spa. So Joomak is a part of this, and the chef, as I said, was previously a pastry chef. He started that in 2004. My personal fun fact is, so I went to his restaurant, Joomak Bonjum, which started as a pop-up, and I looked back, it was October 2020. So it was still very early pandemic times. And I remember I was sitting outside at a table. We were still doing the masks, and it was kind of those weird but special dining experience of being in New York and living through that time. So it's nice to see he's taken this concept and now he's got this beautiful space and doing this really outstanding menu. And I was grateful to be there. The cost of the meal was $280. As a guest, I was comped. I did leave gratuity. I'm very grateful to be invited. Would I go back? Yes. And their website is joomaknyc.com, and Instagram is at Joomak_ in New York, and that's JOOMAK, Joomak. So there you go. What do you think? Any comments?
It sounds like a place I want to go to soon.
Yeah.
Me too.
I think you'd like it. I think you'd both like it. And they were really lovely. Like the whole team. Because I find that, I dine out a lot, as I know you do, Rick, you both do. And it's like how people make you feel. Like the food has to be awesome. You want delicious food, but really the experience is about how they make you feel. They made me feel really warm and welcome to be there. So I appreciated it a lot and I'd recommend it.
Well, the other, and of course, what occurs to me is that this is a particular case where a tasting menu allows you to taste a lot of different things from the kitchen, whereas I know my own. Sometimes when I'm solo dining, I'd like to try more things on the menu, but it's the portions are bigger and it's too much food, and you hopefully enjoy what you've ordered, but if you're not tasting 8 different things from the chef's kitchen. So
True.
it's
Yeah.
a particular good time for a tasting menu.
Yes. I solo dine a lot and I like tasting menus on my own for one of those
Yeah.
reasons. Yeah, that's a great part of the experience. And I also find tasting menus are just great solo too, because there's so much happening. Like there's interactions with chefs, people are coming to the table. It's an experience. And when you're with someone else, you're focused on your friend, the person you're with, and sometimes you're distracted and you're not like taking in everything that's happening in front of you. And so yeah, I think tasting menus are great for that solo as well. Okay, so that's that. Thank you to Joomak and their team and their PR, Mona Creative, for having me. It's time for the final question. So, my upcoming guest is going to be Paul Carmichael. He is the chef of Kabawa, which is officially opening next week in the Momofuku Ko space, or formerly the Momofuku Ko space. And he's already opened Bar Kabawa, which is at the same space, but it's like behind the main dining room. And I went there already. It's awesome. I know Paul. I've known him since he's a Momofuku veteran. He was formerly at Ma Pesh in New York City. That's when I met him. And he was out in Australia before this job. He was at Saboa in Sydney, which I did go to when I was in Sydney, but it was before he was there. But when I was working on my Chef Wise book, Paul's the chef I reached out to be a part of it because I have so much respect for him, and he is a part of it. So, Rick and Lachlan, can you ask a question for Paul? And Lachlan, are you also familiar at all with Saboa? I don't know if I ever pronounce it correctly. Saboa, a restaurant in Sydney.
I'm not. I have not been to Sydney in 7 years, so it's been a little while. But my question is just one that I'm always asking prospective employers about what they need, and that is, what is your advice to a young chef coming up in this industry? What would you recommend that people focus on early in their time in culinary arts?
Awesome. I will ask. And Rick?
A question might be, does he think there's a market, or that it might be a good idea to have some entrees that have animal protein but are more plant-based? Obviously, a lot of, every restaurant we go to now that is not plant-based has some, vegetarian or plant-based choices. But I've, I wonder, as time evolves and many people are eating healthier, if there's something. I guess it's the whole idea of, is the protein on the center of the plate, or is it sort of off to the side? And would that be a good idea? I mean, if it is a good idea, a restaurant that was sort of known for that, as well as having fully plant based, or things that are not plant based. Maybe it's a variation on conventionality or a twist that would be popular.
Great. I will find out. Thank you both. And before we end, too, this is a big, huge milestone being the 50th. And on my tip, I was talking about, celebrations. How are you celebrating, like personally, like this milestone, or with the school? I mean, there's going to be a big party, there's things going on throughout the year, but I think it's such a big deal to be at this moment and through 50 years of seeing the changes that have happened in the culinary landscape. It's before the Food Network, it's before social media. It's, so much has happened. So I guess just to end on what are you looking forward to most with celebrating the 50th?
Well, it's certainly a milestone number. I probably will work, hopefully there'll be a 40 and a 50, but that'll be a while from now. But that's actually the way I just said that is a segue to a sentiment that really, it doesn't have to do so much with 30, but it's more like surviving and doing well after 25 or 27. And that's the idea that, this school has become an institution, and it's unusual that entrepreneurs or business people get to spend a lot of time on something and build it, and that becomes an institution. I mean, there's a lot of brands you could mention, and if you said, will those be around in 20 or 30 or 40 years? And you'd have to say, well, I don't know, or I wouldn't bet on it. And because we're a school, and a good school can become an institution, it's really satisfying for me to know and project that 15, 20, 30 years from now, the ICE is going to be a very good school. There'll still be a market. There'll still be a need. Will evolve, and certainly it took a team of people and so many great employees and chef instructors and over the years. But and well. I'm certainly not. It took a lot of other people with a lot of skills and competence to get to where we are. But it's great satisfaction for me as the call it the father of the business and the father of the institution that all this work has ended up in something that will be around a long time. And along the way, there's luck. A little bit of luck always helps, and timing. Certainly, you go back to earlier in our conversation, the whole way I got involved was a matter of timing and kismet, and
Right.
couldn't have predicted what would come to pass. But yeah, it's very satisfying, and um, and then on top of that, we get to create some new swag and T-shirts that say 30th anniversary or
Or
50th
50th,
anniversary.
because your 30th anniversary. I mean, they're both
Yeah,
incredible milestones. Your 30 years, the 50 for the whole
yeah.
school. But like, yeah, and I guess, yeah, maybe in a couple of years we could do your 10-year mark, Lachlan. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, like you say, I'm still a comparative baby here at ICE, and so I'm really looking forward to the narratives of people who started at the beginning, and I'm really looking forward to hearing their stories and really understanding the struggles and the triumphs that they've achieved throughout their time since graduation.
Yeah, well, congratulations to both of you. I mean, the school's amazing. What you've created, the grads or the alum are just one thing that like shows how the school has, changed people's lives and careers and done good. So, congratulations to both of you. Thank you for being guests on my show. This is a lot of fun. And I hope to meet you in person, Lachlan and Rick. I hope to see you soon. Our paths usually cross somewhere out there in the culinary world as we're going to events and restaurants. So hope to see
All
you
right.
soon.
Well, thank you very much for having us on. It's been a pleasure, and you are an institution in the New
I'm an
York in the
institution.
culinary. And this and when you I mean and this is podcast number what? Is it like
We're at 410. I've been at it
Amazing.
for a while. I've been at it for a while. Yeah.
wow?
Um, I
Well,
love
thank
doing it. I love talking to people and hearing their story and supporting the industry. So, but thank you.
all right.
Well,
Well,
I'm looking forward to showing you the campus in LA and buying you in and out and proving my point.
Fantastic. I usually get in and out when I'm visiting. I have to say, I like the drive through. It's very well done.
All right, what's your answer then? Shake Shack or In and Out?
See, I can't. It's a both. I mean, Shake Shack's amazing, but yeah, when I visit LA, it's fun to go to In and Out, and so I'm a fan of both of them, to be honest. Okay, so that's the show. Thank you to my guests today, Rick Smilow, the chairman and CEO of the Institute of Culinary Education, and Lachlan Sands, the president of the LA campus of the Institute of Culinary Education. Their website is ice.edu. On social, you can follow at ICE Culinary. And as mentioned earlier, their tagline or their hashtag is Culinary Voice. And you could also follow the hashtag ICE Culinary. And thanks to the Institute of Culinary Education for their support of this episode as well. Again, their website is ice.edu. There's a lot of content and information on there. And we got through a lot today, but there's so much more we could have talked about the schools. So go check it out and get involved. You can follow me at Shari Bayer at Bayer PR and All Industry. My YouTube channel and Facebook page are All in the Industry. And my other websites are BayerPublicRelations.com and ShariBayer.com. And all of our shows are archived at alltheindustry.com. And you can find us wherever you listen to your podcast, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere. You can check out my book, Chef Wise, Life Lessons from Leading Chefs Around the World. And that is available wherever books are sold. Thanks to my engineer today, Armin. Thanks to the team at ICE. And again, to Rick and Lachlan. I am your host and producer, Shari Bayer. I will be back soon with a new show. Hope you'll tune in then. And thank you as always for being part of All in the Industry. Bye. All in the Industry is an independent podcast hosted and produced by Shari Bayer. Follow us on Instagram at All Industry and on our Facebook page and YouTube channel, All in the Industry. Subscribe to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts so you don't miss any new episodes. To learn more, visit allintheindustry.com.